Last time on Kimchi no Video. So yeah, I'll say it. Tenchi Muyo Ryaoki might just be the best anime OVA series ever created. Sequels! Love them or hate them, but you cannot escape them. If any type of media is even remotely successful, it's pretty much guaranteed that a sequel will come at some point. If the franchise continues to be successful with all of these sequels, at least from a financial standpoint, those sequels could even continue for years or decades. Actually, they might never go away. But when they finally do stop squeezing sequels out of every orifice of a franchise, it's time to finally remake that sucker while it's still grasping for breadth and relevance. That's right, when it comes to media, nothing ever truly dies. Yeah, there's a reason a lot of people don't like sequels these days. However, at one point, sequels were not as frowned upon. Just look at some of the classics. Ghostbusters 2, The Empire Strikes Back, Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo. Yeah, sequels were a little bit higher quality back in the day, and nowhere was that more apparent than with the world of anime. Dragon Ball Z is technically a sequel. How about Beautiful Dreamer, or the second season of Ranma? Classic stuff indeed. Most people consider each of these sequels perfect, or at least close to it, and that brings us to today's sequel we are taking a look at. A little OVA series simply titled Tenchi Muyo Ryaoki 2. Yeah, they could have called it something different like Tenchi 2, Washu's Coming for You, or Tenchi the Second, Are There Anime Girls in Heaven? But they didn't have to do that. The title was a mission statement for the entire second OVA series. It was their way of saying, oh yeah, you want more of that? You like the first one? Well, here you go. Not much has changed, but here it is. Well, did it work for the series? Was the mission statement realized? Did we get more quality time with Washu and Mahoshi? Well, that's what we're here to find out today as we dive into this classic OVA and see, is it the best anime sequel ever made? So, everything that was great about the first OVA is still great here. The animation is superb. The sound design is something to behold. Every girl could be best girl in any other series, so it's really hard to just pick one here, and the story picks up right where the first series left off. We open the second OVA with the gang taking care of a baby. I hate human children as much as the next guy, but this definitely brings some good laughs and quite a few emotional moments with Washu straight out of the gate, proving that she continues to be best girl for life. Soon enough, we learn that the creators are furries, and then there's some sci-fi elements where a fake Ryoko comes to Earth to take away the real Washu, so of course they have to rescue her, and there's some great action scenes as a result. But before long, the entire thing concludes when the Tenchi crew gets a visit from Jirai, which results in some very confusing family tree elements, but there's another battle for Tenchi, so hey, more action, and yeah, that's pretty much the second OVA in a nutshell. If it sounds a little bit confusing, that's okay, because it is. They jump around quite a bit in this OVA despite its relatively short runtime for the amount of story they throw at you, but somehow it never feels rushed. I've always thought that the different Tenchi series were very good at painting a picture of an environment that, despite all the craziness going on in said environment, somehow seems tranquil and serene. And guess what? They did exactly that here. Even if there's a fight or an explosion or new aliens arriving, it seems to be a peaceful place, and it's hard to not want to visit the Tenchi household. But since this is a sequel and all, what's different from the original? Well, not a whole lot, and that's okay. Sometimes the best sequels are the ones that just give you a little bit more of the same when that original version of it was great. Why do you think that people love AC/DC and they have been able to release the same song basically over and over and over for the last 50 years? Well, if someone loves one AC/DC song, they typically love the next 20. Sure, it might eventually get tiring having the same chords and cliched lyrics over and over and over again, but I think most would agree that it's hard to deny the sheer power of If You Want Blood and Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. Tenchi is taking that AC/DC approach here, and they had to know what they were doing when they were creating this thing. Take the opening song, for example, I'm a Pioneer. Sure, it screams nostalgia now to anyone the second that they press play on that VHS tape or Laserdisc, but I can only imagine that it even felt very welcoming and possibly nostalgic even when it came out in 1994. The second OVA was released only a little bit over a year after the first one, but it feels like they knew this series was destined to be a classic. On my previous episode about the first OVA, I mentioned that it also seemed like this series was designed to be a huge franchise with staying power, and the opening sequence really does show how laser focused they were to try to achieve that goal. If you liked the first OVA, I really can't imagine a world where you wouldn't like the second one. Sure, people will typically point to the first series as the go-to Tenchi series, but I also would assume some people don't even know that they are two different series technically. In America, they were marketed as one thing. That's how similar they were. Most hardcore otaku know that they're different series now, but you would have to imagine that back in the day that wasn't always the case, especially when this thing aired on Toonami. And on that front, I remember people being confused by the fact that the OVAs, Tenchi Universe, and Tenchi in Tokyo were different, but who could blame them? Toonami really didn't try to hide the fact that they were different, but they also didn't really explain why or how they were different either. So it was probably very confusing to some people as to why the series seemed to have a hard reset every so often in general. And then if you tried to explain that the OVA part of it was different as well, even though they never said it was an OVA on TV and most people watching American TV wouldn't know what an OVA was anyway, yeah, it seems like it was a lot more simple just to market this as one series altogether. I get it. On the other hand, ironically enough, I could see some people pointing out these similarities as the greatest weakness of the second OVA series. It is very similar to the original. I don't fall into that camp at all, but I could certainly see some people looking at it that way, so we might as well touch on it here. You see, when you produce a sequel, it's very hard to navigate those waters of what to change and what to keep the same. If you change too much, you end up with Big Top Pee-wee. If things stay too similar, you do risk monotony over time. But even with all of these similarities, there are some subtle changes that should be enough to keep a majority of the audience entertained. I mean, Ryo-Oki turns into a human-like creature. That should be enough to keep a very specific group of people very entertained for this series. There's also some new characters. Plus, I know I mentioned it in passing earlier, but this new opening song is so good. It just screams mid-90s inspirational anime opener. It's just so great. Go check it out if you never have. I truly feel like I will always be a pioneer after listening to this jam over and over and over and over and over again. Many people reference the third Tenchi OVA as the series that ruined everything, and that has something to do with all the changes they threw at everyone. We're not going to get into that whole mess today, but I've never heard anyone cite the second OVA as a franchise low point at all. And I don't know about you, but I would much rather be the average guy at the party that at least has some good jokes as opposed to the one throwing up in the middle of the room and ruining everyone's time. The second Tenchi OVA is the average guy with the good jokes. The third Tenchi OVA is the guy throwing up in the middle of the room. The second Tenchi OVA knows better. Good job, second Tenchi OVA. There's a lot of second seasons out there that are average or even disappointing, but this is neither. Sure, it's derivative of the first series, but I think that we're seeing here that's not such a bad thing, and in the case of this, it's a pretty good thing. Soon enough, the creators would start to change things up quite a bit in the movies and the various versions on TV, but there's something so perfect about all of that Tenchi media, to me at least, that came out in the 90s. It was just a good time to be a fan of the franchise and anime in general. Just think about it, between 1993 and 1999, there was a bunch of Tenchi released. There's the OVA versions, there's the TV versions, there's the movie versions, and there's even the spin-off Pretty Sammy OVA as well as TV series. That's right, there was a lot of Tenchi going on, but it doesn't stop there. If you're fluent in Japanese, there's drama CDs to consume, there's light novels to consume, there's manga to consume, and there's even video games. It was truly Tenchi mania. And sure, not everything was perfect per se, but I would argue that none of the releases I've experienced from that time period were straight up bad by any means. I know some people don't like Tenchi in Tokyo, but I don't fall into that camp, so while you could argue that everything I just mentioned is a sequel based on the original series, this sequel, the original sequel that we're looking at today, before all of the other sequels, has to be one of the best. So is this the best anime sequel ever made? That's a hard one to say. There's a lot of great anime sequels out there, but similar to anyone that would say the first OVA was the best OVA ever made, I would be hard pressed to argue this wasn't the best anime sequel ever made. It's funny because I feel that we are touching on a lot of the same points we touched on in the first Tenchi OVA. And now we're even ending things in a very similar fashion, which really drives home the whole idea that I am delivering here today. Sometimes more of the same, especially in media, is okay. And it's even praised by many. So was this episode as good as the first Tenchi OVA episode here on Kimchi no Video? Who knows? But here we are at the end, so hopefully it was worth everyone's time. We covered a lot of the same ground with slight variations, so that makes me feel good at least because I'm following the tradition that was set up from this OVA series that we are covering today. That being said, it's time for me to get out of here. I need to start building some courage, some endurance, and some stamina, because everyone knows what comes after the second Tenchi OVA series. The third one.
近くにいてもあなた